Hello everyone, Ceri the Crafter here, that's C-E-R-I the Crafter, and I can't tell you how surprised I am at the amount of interest my travel art books have caused. Now, I've done a cover video, I've done the other cover video, I'll put links to them in the description box below. I did a flip through it request of some of my subscribers, and the request was also can I show how I made it. So this is the follow-up to the flip through, where I'm actually going to show you how I made it as much as I can within one video. Okay, let's put that out there, in as much as I can in one video, because obviously I don't like to go too long. So let's get started before we do anything else. Right, I've already gel printed a couple of pieces for the cover. I've made these 9 inches square each, so that's 9 inches by 9 inches. If that's in centimetres, is that 230 millimetres or 23 centimetres? I think that's about right, if my measurements are okay. Yeah, it says 23 centimetres. So I've done them square, even though the sizes for the cover are not square. I will give you all the dimensions when we get that far, but I want to get this bit done first so that then I can move on to the next bit. Now, I've done 2 pieces of it on cardstock. I usually back the 2 pieces together to give myself a bit of a more rigid cover, which is why I'm going to glue these together. So let's pull in a bit of a clean mat so I don't get glue all over my workstation. I'm not really conscious of there being an up or a down. I'm just basically, that's probably either that or that will be the cover. So I don't know, I've got a feeling it's probably going to be that. Anyway, my first stage is I'm literally taking glue stick, and I use this brand Prit, and I put it all over here, concentrating on the edges, even though the edges are going to be trimmed slightly, because I know as a habit of mine I tend to miss the edges, or if I'm going to miss anywhere or when I'm gluing, it's an edge or a corner. And that's another reason why I want to glue more than wanted the covers 9 inches square before I started, because then when I cut them down I'm more likely to have glued the places where I need to cut. Now, I'm putting enough on here to hold them together, but this is an art journal. This isn't a journal that's going to be stored infinitum. It's going to be in and out of a bag. It's going to be used, well, it's going to be used by me, I hope. And I know that it's going to stand a little bit of a test at the time, but I'm not worried too much about it having any longevity. I haven't brushed it with Mod Podge or anything. Come on off there. Now, another reason I like glue stick is I can slide the covers around so that they marry up to the best of their ability. Obviously I must have cut that one slightly differently. Right, I'm going to take this out of the way because it's all gluey. And now I've got this on here. Now, a lot of the time when I do stuff, I will use a smoother and I will smooth it down. I'm going to do that here, but I'm doing it quite gently. And the reason is there's raised texture on here, and I don't want to catch the texture and rip it off. A lot of the time when I'm doing these, I will use a brayer. And I'll use a brayer because this rolling action will flatten stuff down for me, but it will also mean that I'm not dragging across the surface, so therefore it's not going to catch on anything. It's just something I do with a lot of things that are textured, but not so much textured that the brayering action will flatten out the texture. Right, this bit is going to get put to one side until it's time to cut and assemble, because it needs a little bit time to dry, because within here obviously you've got the glue. The glue, although it's not a liquid glue, it still has moisture to it, and the moisture will be soaking into the fibres of this cover, and I want to make sure that it's as dry as it can be until I get round to it. Right, do a bit more prep work now. Where's that sheet? Right, bring this back in, even though, let's see if I can just wipe some of this glue off it. I know I'm going to get questions about these. This was like a heat-proof Tim Holtz silicone mat that I bought a long time ago. Certainly not the cheapest piece of equipment I've ever bought. And I have since found that if you go into the baking aisle in some supermarkets, they have something very similar to this that they sell for baking things like cookies on. So have a look there. You may not need to pay this much for it. In fact, you know you don't need to pay this much. But I bought it. I made that decision, and it's fine. And I look after it because it wasn't cheap. So, all right, that's dry. Now, down the spine of my bring back in. You can see it on the real one. Down the spine of each of my art journal pieces. Let's take that out actually. I like to put a piece of fabric down the spine because when I sew them in, I don't have the knot on the inside, I have the knot on the outside, because if I had the knot on the inside, it would get in the way of me painting or doodling and doing whatever, so I put it on the outside. I like to conceal it with a piece of cloth, and also by gluing this in place, it secures everything within it. So let me just get this back in here. We'll sort that out later. So, right, so all I've done is I've got a bit of fabric and I've ripped it to the height of the journal, which the cover is going to be 8.25 inches tall or 210 millimeters tall. Okay, this could be anything from a piece of linen to a bit of an old handkerchief to any fabric you want, really. Anything that's okay. I mean, I've torn the edges on this. So my next step is, when I first did this, I used to leave these just plain, but I thought, you know what, let's make them interesting. So I'm going to use archival ink. I always use archival ink because there's bound to be moisture touching this at some point, whether it's on my hands, whether it's moving around. And I know once this is stamped, it's stamped. I'm then going to take just a text stamp. I'm not going to give you a brand because, to be honest, I don't know what brand this is. This is just a text stamp. And I do this very often with fabric pieces I'm putting in. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to stamp onto the fabric. I press down for a little while just to let the ink sink through. And as you can see, it just turns it into something less boring than just a white piece of fabric. Now, if you've got a theme or you've got pretty coloured fabrics you really want to use, by all means use them for the spine. This was just a quick way I like to do, just to keep it tidy. I use the coffee dyed one because I found that if I use the sepia one, it's too much in your face, although this just gives you a little bit of a detail in the background. So let's put those out of the way. So that's the next bit that's prepared, ready to go. So now we need to get into pages. Now, because this is for different mediums, I've got my books are separated into painty backgrounds, watercolor backgrounds, and inky backgrounds, but the papers are all mixed media paper. So I've just gone out to my local stationery store, which in my country is W.H. Smith's. I bought a mixed media art pad. It's got 30 sheets. It's 250 GSM. I don't know, I can't translate that for you into American. It's A4 size, which is our standard size. It says it's acid free, which, to be honest, I don't know the difference anyway. But it's a reasonably thick stock because I'm going to get this wet. Okay? Now, my inserts will range between 12 and 10 pages in thickness. It is down to how thick or how bulky you want them to be. So my next stage is, I've got myself a cutting mat, and if I open the first page, I have measured this to fit. So the height of my journal cover is 8.25, and the height of an A4 piece of paper is 8.25. So that's where that's dictated. Now, the page for the signature, because it's going to be folded in half, is actually 8.75, which is 220 millimeters. So we're talking in millimeters. This is 210 millimeters. This is 220 millimeters. And remember, each of these is going to be folded in half, so that will be your ending page. Now, I only want 10 pages in this, and I've chosen 10 because there's 30 sheets in the pack, which means I can make 3 out of this. So I'm immediately going to open this up. This is why this piece is here, because I sorted out 10, and I'm going to lay it flat on my cutting mat. This is just the way I like to do this, guys. There are umpteen different ways to do it. I take a metal ruler and a sharp blade, like one of these X-Actos or craft knife or whatever you're using, and I know that I'm going to end up trimming these pages afterwards anyway, so I'm just going to come down, and the trick is just to keep running the blade down here until it cuts all the way through to the cutting mat. There's no need to heavy arm it or keep pressing down. If you push and push and push, you are likely to end up tearing the paper rather than cutting it. This way you end up with a nice clean line. Am I through? Not yet. Now there is one thing to note. You're going to have to remember or find a way of making sure that your 8 1/4 and 8 3/4, so your height and your width are kept as individual measurements. Now, why didn't I take them out of the book? I left them in the book because once this is completely finished, I will trim the cover down, and that will give me these little pieces in my mixed media book. This could become a really little cute journal. I'll cover the front, cover the back, and then that's a little journal that I can actually just carry around with me. Okay, so that's why I've done this. Actually, I'm going to take this post-it note while I've got it here, and I'm going to come in. Ceri draws an arrow. Wow, how interesting. Okay, so now that we know that, this is the right orientation for the up and the down. So remember, we've got 8 1/4 or 210 millimeters by 8 3/4 or 220 millimeters. Okay, and I want to make sure plenty of checking going on. 8 1/4. Now, if you want to take a screenshot, this will show you all of the measurements. I will try to remember to put them in the description box as well, so that you've got them there as well. Okay, this is a standard size traveler's notebook, or this is what I believe to be a standard size traveler's notebook. And when I first started making traveler's notebooks for myself in the past, these were the dimensions I found, and these work perfectly well for my covers and my Midori cover. So next thing I want to do is I want to actually fold each of these. Now, I'm leaving my arrowed piece on the top just so I know I'm literally coming in, folding the edges over so they marry up, and then I'm using my thumb. Now, someone's probably going to be asking, Ceri, why didn't you use your scoreboard? Ceri didn't use his scoreboard because dividing 8 3/4 in half is a bit of a tricky requirement. So I tend to do this just by eye. And as I said, I will be, I think that was 2 pieces. That felt very thick. It was 2 pieces. I'm folding them individually as well, because if I took all 10 pages and fold them at one time, I would find that they wouldn't fold evenly. You'd have some that would be sticking out, some that wouldn't be sticking out, and not in a good way. Now, even once I fold these individually and I put the signature together, you're going to see that the middle papers will protrude out past the center of, protrude out past the other sheets within the signature. That's a natural thing because every time I do this, of course, and I put it in, I'm folding it and folding, so there's more and more layers of paper or mixed media stock in there. And this is what I do with the journal as well. As soon as I've actually put the signature together, I usually go in and then I trim it. Feels like 2 in there. There is 2 in there. I then trim it to the right size. So feel free to speed up to ends of any sections you like, guys. I'm never insulted by that. I would just rather keep things in real time. Okay, I don't need to use that anymore for this, but I will need it when I do the cover, so I'm just going to put it to one side. It's just a little bit of a fail-safe for me because in the past, I have cut the cover or the signature pages in the wrong orientation. So those are all together now, so let's put them into the signature. A signature is just the group of pages. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the last one is 10. Now if I tap these all down and push them right to the back, this is what I mean by, can you see that? This is what I mean about the center pages will stick out. Now, if I was to look at this now, I will find that this measurement is 4 3/4. Now, if it was thinner paper, that would be less. However, I know 4 3/4 is going to protrude past the end of my cover when I've stitched them in. So this is where I do my final trim before I even seal them, stitch them in. So bear with me because this is part of the process. Right, I'm just making sure everything is lined up when all of those are pressed together as much as I can. I'm going to come in just with a binder clip at the top and at the bottom, just so that I know when I'm doing the cutting, things are not going to slide around. Bring back in my cutting mat, and then we repeat what we did before, but I'm going to use the most forward edge of the paper, like the very first one. Let's see if I can pick this up. The very first page will be my guide for cutting, so that when I've done this, all of the others will be flush to it. I just want to make sure that's absolutely up against there. Sorry, I know I'm being a little picky at this point, but I'd rather get this bit right. So again, just using a repeated action of cutting down all the way through. Now, if by chance I make a mess of the edge of the pages, am I going to worry? No. It's an art journal that is just for me to travel with, just for me to play with techniques, just for me to doodle at the airport or doodle in the hotel room or do some little sketches here and there. I am not 100% worried about this. I would love it to be perfect, but I don't try for perfection anymore because I know it's unachievable. And I know a lot of people are going, Ceri, you've said that so many times. Yeah, and I'm not saying it for you guys, I'm saying it for myself, because the more I reinforce the thought that perfectionism is not the goal, the more I will believe it. And the more I believe it, the easier it will become for me to actually deal with it. So there's a bit there that doesn't look like it's come off yet. It hasn't. For some reason there's a bit right in the middle there that's just not come off. Right, cutting away is not the best idea, but I may have to just tidy that little bit up with the scissors if I haven't tidied it up first. So there you go. I've got a little bit of a piece there. I don't know why that did that. That's slightly annoying. What I'll do now is I will just show you how to cure it. So take these off again. Now I know that all of these are okay. It's this last few pages, so I'm just going to come in, reposition my ruler where it was before, and then come in and take out that bit. Now it could easily have been where the paper was so thick I was cutting through a lot of layers. This is what we call keeping it real, people. There you go. I think that'll be fine. That's neat enough for me. As I said, it is purely up to me to use this. I'm not overly worried. I can always trim it up later if I want. Right. So I'm going to clip that together for no other reason than it just keeps it all neat and tidy. Okay. Time to put the blade by. I will be using a guillotine for cutting the cover. So basically, I do need to keep the ruler out. So basically, we just need a bit of a tidy up. So give me a second, guys. Just going to tidy this up and then we'll come back to you. So all those little scraps of paper cleared away now. So I've got this to one side, but I mean, I'm not overly worried about that jagged edge. As I said, it's an art journal. It's not going to bother me. Now, we're going to come into the 9-inch square. Now, I need to remember the measurement of 8 3/4 by 8 1/4 tall. So I'm going to bring in my guillotine, because that's how I'm going to do this. Now, I did have one edge that was sticking over the top, so I'm going to use that one first. So I quite like where this is at. So this needs to be 8 3/4. I'm just going to take that little bit off the top. Right. So this is the height. The height is 8 1/4. I think I just said 8 3/4, but 8 1/4 is what the height is. So I'm going to come in to 8 1/4. Make sure it's 8 1/4. So that has now given me my height. My width needs to be 8 3/4. So I don't have a lot to take off. So I'm just going to slice a little bit off one side, turn it around, and then make this next bit 8 3/4. And that's purely, as I said before, so that I know that the edges of my cover are nice and neat and solidly glued. And we're done with the trimmer. So I would normally have left this overnight before I worked on it. Okay, but we're taking a bit of a risk here, but that's just the way we're doing it. So now I need to remember which is the up. So the height is 8 1/4. There's my little sticky note, just so I know that I've got the right orientation. Now, as I said, this is 8 3/4. Trying to do that on a scoring board is not easy, so I'm just going to fold this by hand. So I know this is the up, so I need to fold in this way and take that out. Now I'm going to fold this over so that the corners meet up. Now, if you're going to do this while it's still slightly wet, which this one is, you might get a little bit of creasing in the middle. Actually, no, I've done quite well on that one. I am just going to finger press this down, well, thumb press this down at this point. And then I'm going to bring in my brayer and roll it over it. I don't want to drag my bone folder across it, just in case I do any more damage by, because remember, the moisture is in the core of this at the moment. So that's my journal cover, and these are my journal pages. So as you can see, it'll all sit in there quite neatly. Actually, I could have done with taking a little bit more off there. Actually, I'm not going to make you sit through it again, but as you can see, I needed to have taken just a little bit more off that. So I think I'm going to pause you and I'm going to do that and take that little bit extra off there, because I don't mind it being flush with the edge, but I don't want it coming out of the edge. So let me put you on pause a second and I will get that cut down just enough so that it fits neatly within the cover. Now the height obviously is correct because everything is 8 1/4. It's this variation here, so I just want to chop that down a bit. Okay, so that's trimmed down, and I think I was cutting it, I was thinking, why didn't it work as it did before? I think what it is, because of the thickness of the paper, I forgot to take into account the roundness of the cover there, but as you can see, it should fit within the cover, and that does, so I'm happy with that. Right, the next thing to do now is actually to stitch all of this in, so we're going to do that next, and to do that you need a few bits of equipment. You're going to need something called an awl, which is AWL, or an owl. It's basically for puncturing holes. You're going to need a needle with a large hole in it, because you're going to get the thread through it. I've got a combination of heavy duty threads here. Now you can use waxed thread, you can use non-waxed thread, you can use sewing floss. I've even sewn in with dental floss before now. So I was just reeling out, so I was trying to match the colour, and I'm putting something on the cover anyway. So let's just do it. This is just heavy duty sewing thread, this. So I'm going to do about 3.5 lengths of this, purely because I'd rather have a little bit too much than too little. Out of the way. Now, tip. As soon as you've cut your thread and you've got your needle out, thread your needle. You're less likely to lose your needle at this point. So put all your bits of equipment by as you go, therefore you know where they're going to be. Right, where am I up to? So I'm now going to use those binder clips once again, and I'm going to clip my cover so that it fits all the way to the back of the spine. It's important, because if it's to the back of the spine, then you know that it's going to be in as far as it can. You may need to adjust. I very often will put a clip on, take a clip off, just to make sure things are all there. And I tuck my thumb in to keep pressing that spine all the way back to the spine. Right, so we've got it all assembled in this way. Now what I need to do now is I now need to punch the holes through. Now I have an old book here. This book's seen so many journal makes. It's a little bit scary, really. And we're going back to using the awl or the owl. I close the book as much as I can and still get my hand in. And I'm going to push right down directly through all of those layers through the spine. Now, if you close the book up, you are much more likely to come through the actual spine. If your book is wider apart, you're much more likely to miss it. So I usually put a hole at roughly in the middle. I come down about 1/2 inch to 1 inch from the top. And I do the same thing at the top. For me, I like to turn the book around and do the same from the other end. You don't have to. You can do it from whichever way feels best to you. Once I've done that, I look at the outside and I make sure that the holes are pushed through from both sides, because sometimes you'll find you've got a small hole on the outside when you thought you'd had a big enough hole all the way through. There you go. Right, we're now done with these. So now, I'm going to use a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. It's the one I use for most things. It can be done in several different ways. This, however, is just the way I do it. You can go from the inside to the outside or the outside to the inside. In this one, I'm going from the outside to the inside because I want the threads left on the outside. So I'm going to go in through the middle hole. Now I'm going to keep hold of this because I don't want to lose this. I'm going to go out through the top hole. Make sure to catch it up on your binder hooks. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and go back in again. And now the reason I'm holding this quite taut is that when you go back out through the center hole, you do not want to split or stitch through the original thread, because if you do that, you're never going to be able to tighten it up. Now, you've got the spine and you've got your 2 threads. You want to put this thread through to the other side. Now, I've got an enormous amount of thread on here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull one of these to make it more even, for no other reason than I just can. Now, at this point, I'm going to take my binder clips off. There is a reason for that. It's because if I'm pulling this sewing tight, it's to pull the signature, which are all the folded pages, back towards the cover. If I've got the clips on, they're not going to let me do that. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a tug. I'm going to give 1 knot. Now I tend to pull in a vertical direction, not a horizontal. Don't know why I do that. I've just always done it. A quick check. It should be tight there. So I give it 1 knot, 2 knot, and I always do 3 knots. That's just unnecessary for most people, but I like to do 3 knots. I'm also going to leave a little bit of tail top and bottom, but this is all going to be glued down next anyway, so I'm not worried about that. Well, I am worried about it, but I'm not worried about it. So this then gives us our arty piece. Now, it's going to be quite bulky, but when we start working in it, because the liquid of the inks and the water and the paints is going to soften the fibres within the pages, it's going to eventually be a little bulky, and then when it's put in its holder, it'll eventually sit down and lie flat. So time to have a tidy up. Make sure you put that needle back where you found it, because I know I've lost needles before now, and we've got a dog, and I don't want my dog getting injured. So next thing to do now is to glue the spine on, or that's the next job for me anyway. So bringing in a bit of mat so that I don't get it everywhere. This is the spine covering, which is just going to go over there. I've already decided that's my front, although that could easily be my front, but that's the front I like. I like the placement of that. So what I do is I'm going to use Fabri-Tac. Now I'm running low on my Fabri-Tac. I have ordered it, but it hasn't arrived yet. Interesting, I think. So just doing a bit of a visual check as to how far across this is going to come. Now, if you put on too much Fabri-Tac and you don't smooth it out, it will seep through your fabric. But what I like to do is, I know it's about a 1/2 inch spine, so I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to put some Fabri-Tac on here, and this is the front of my cover, and I'm going to come in with my finger and I'm going to smooth it out. I'm doing this so that if it's a thinner layer, then I know it's less likely to squish through my piece of fabric. But if it does, it does. It's not the end of the world if it does. I've only glued the front half on purpose because it's easier for me to work on one side at a time, because obviously it's a book. So there you go. So that's press that down. Just slide it back and forth until you're happy with it. Then I can come around to the other side, and I have an idea now where the other end of the fabric's going to be. I'm just going to do the same as I did on the other side. Yeah, my Fabri-Tac's running out. As I said, I did order it, but it's the weekend at the moment, so I don't think Mr. Postman's going to be delivering it for me today. Right, so that's Fabri-Tac. I'm going to smooth it out with my fingers, and then I'm just going to fold this up and press it down onto the surface, just a little bit there. So that's how I get my spine all nicely covered, and that's how I can seal the threads that I sewed it in with. That means it's reinforced the spine, because remember, we're going to be using wet mediums in here, which means that the fibres can get a little soft, and I don't want the fibres getting soft and then the thread pulling and ripping through. So I now need to change mats, because we're now going to go to another section of this, which is actually getting all of the inks on. Also, there's something I'm going to do. Sorry, just rubbing a bit of stuff off my mat there. There's a bit I'm going to do while I'm off camera. Is I like rounded corners. So I've got my corner rounder, and I'm literally going to use the 7mm one, and I'm going to go through the whole book, and I'm just going to punch all of the corners and all of the pages. Okay, that I'll do off camera, because it's going to be really annoying to watch, and the clicking noise is probably going to drive you nuts. Okay, so back in 2, guys, and it'll be a fresh setup then, ready to get messy. So here we go. So it's all nice and done. I've rounded all the corners of the pages and that. Another thing worth mentioning, if you don't want to put a double-sided card here, if you put one-sided card there, you can glue the first page to the back of the cover, if that's what you choose to do. I mean, it's an option. I do that with my planner inserts, I must admit, but it's up to you what you wish to do. So we're starting with this. Now, there were 3 techniques in the original. So if I look at the original, first techniques was very much Diane Reevely, which is a baby wipe and Diane Reevely paints. This one was very much watercolours. And the third one was like a smooshing technique where I picked up inks. So I'm not going to make an individual book of each of them, but I am going to do all 3 techniques in here. So that should tick all the boxes, I think. So let's see. Let's get some paper clips out, because at least I can work out which sections are which. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do 6 of those. Purely just because I've got some idea of what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many does that leave there? You can have another one. And then if I take, and I'll put that on there. Right, this bit isn't necessary for you guys. It's purely because I'm doing the techniques I'm doing. So to do this, I'm going to use some wet wipes or baby wipes, whichever brand you use. I prefer it was a recyclable one or an eco-friendly one. That's what I try to use when I can get them. I'm also going to be using 3 of my stencils, but I'm going to be using the smaller version. That's Dainty Dots. This is Cascading Cubes. And this one is Hopeless Harlequin. I'm using the smaller ones because, to be honest with you, I'm in a small journal. So I'm going to use those for these techniques. And then also on top of that, I'm going to use the Diane Reevely paints, which are these paints, the Dilutions paints. I have, however, used paints like craft paints before now, but if I'm using craft paints, normally I'll put a bit on a clean surface, give it a spritz of water so it's a little more fluid, because these are very, very fluid, but these are not as fluid. I've also divided my paints up into warms and cools, just because it makes it easier, because I know if I grab any 3 from here, they'll all go together. Any 3, they'll go together there. And then if I have 2 of these and 1 of these, that's usually the complementary that goes with that, if that all makes sense. So let's get a bit of a water bottle on the go, just in case I feel I need it. It's just a travel spritz. What I'm going to do is, I'm not going to do the front page, although I did on my others. You can do it if you wish, but I'm going to stick mainly to double pages for this tutorial. So I'm just going to pull in a colour. So what's this? This is Pure Sunshine. Now, you don't need a lot of this paint. You just need a touch of it. Because it's going onto a baby white and it's going to be white, it's going to go quite a way. Now, I'm going to come through and I'm just going to spritz my pages with a little bit of water just to start encouraging them to be absorbent, should we say. So, no need to make them soaking wet, but I do need to start the process off. Now, Diane Reevely paints dry really quickly, so I'm going to pick up some paint. I'm literally going to spread it onto the pages. No particular fashion, just on the pages. I tend to do patches of 3, but you don't need to. I'm going to miss a patch and then do another page. It's amazing how far this paint will go, especially on a baby wipe. So as I said, don't use a lot of paint. You don't need to. We might be able to do the whole of all of the sections with this one amount of paint. So, I will try to put, she's got a website, I think she's got a website. I will put a link to Diane Reevely's website if I can find it. She works and designs for Ranger. You're probably familiar with her name. The moment you see her, you'll go, oh, that's Diane Reevely, and it'll make sense to you when you do. So, so that's my first layer through there. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning now, and I'm going to get that whiteness down there gone. And I'm going to get my next colour. Now, I'm not going to change baby white. There's no need to. But I am going to bring in another colour. Let's bring in pink. Pink's not a colour I use a lot of. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that down. And I think I missed a couple of pages on purpose. So let's just put some pink in here. And the orange or the yellow that's already on this will turn it sort of a coral, sort of peach colour. That's actually fine with me as well. And this is a great way to have one of these books near you when you're doing things like gel printing or you're working on other art pieces, because you can just clean up and use up spare paints in this way, and then you're building backgrounds as you go. Right, what do I want to put in here now? I wonder. Let's put a touch of green in. What's this one? This is Fresh Lime. Okay. Again, just the littlest dot. Now, this is obviously of the cool family. So it's going to be a little careful with this, because if I had red and green, obviously I would make brown. I'm not going to put it with the pink one because I don't think it merits it. It's also okay to leave blank spaces. Like leaving white on a page is never a problem. Let's go all the way to here and do this here, because we've got stenciling and things to go on here afterwards as well. Now, even when you think your wet wipe is finished, it's probably not. Let's come back and get some more in here. You'll just get a lighter value of the colour when you spread it around. Right, so I think we're almost done with that. Go all the way to the front. Now I've got two colours there. I think I want to put one more colour in here. And then I might have to choose something for the other. So what's this one? Pink Flamingo. There you go. This is going to be a smack in your face pink. So again, little tiny dot. Now we are getting to the point where these are almost finished as far as this part of the technique goes. Now, if you see Diane Reevely do this on her journal pages, she'll go in with her fingers and blend it in. I find that only really works on her papers. So if you see her doing that, yes, it's wonderful, but it doesn't always work on a mixed media page. Her journals are made specifically, the papers she's got, for those techniques. So be brave, guys. Have fun. Just remember, there is no right or wrong to this method. There's just doing it. I'm going to pull in. I've got a bit of this purple. This one spits all over the place if I'm not careful. The little seal at the top went away to join someone else. In other words, it was broken when it was delivered. So basically, it's not the best example of using that paint. But that was the postman, it wasn't Ranger. Right. A little bit of that up there as well. So you can have great fun doing this, guys. And I intend, as you know, I'm going to do doodling and just stuff in this when I'm travelling. Well, not this, because mine's already made. But it's nice just to have something that's, I mean, you could do this entire mini art journal by using up spare paint that maybe you've got left over from a project. Have one of these on your desk. Right, there's a little bit of that left, so let's give this a little bit more of a punch. It's a very pink page. For someone who doesn't like pink, I did quite a lot of pink, didn't I? Okay, so now I can put this wet wipe to one side. I'm going to let it dry, and then at some point in the future, because I've got quite a bag of these drying, you'll see a project where I actually use dried wet wipes to build something. Now, this is pretty much already dry to the touch. I'm sure it's not dry to the core, but it's pretty much dry to the touch. So we can go on to the next layer of working on this now. And that's going to be to use the stencils. Now, to use the stencils, you need, or you should use, Diane Reevely uses these blending tools, and I like this technique, so know that that's what I'm going to do as well. Right, let's have a little think-see about what I want to put colour-wise. They're all quite warm, so I think they could probably do with a touch of intensity. I think we've done all of those. Let's be really brave. What's this one? Campso teal? Oh, Calypso teal. Oh, Ceri needs to learn to read. Right. Now, again, it's a little bit of paint. And what you do is you pick it up on your blending tool and you circle it around. Don't pummel the heck out of it, but you do need to build up a little bit of paint on there. Then you take your stencil and you just rub it gently on the surface wherever you want it to come out. The point of this is to just lightly go over it so you've almost got like a ghost of an effect on there. I'm going to go to the back one, which is this one over here. There's probably enough on this stencil for me to actually do a little bit more. Now you don't have to do 3 areas, that just happens to be what I'm doing. A little bit there and a little bit above there. There'll come a point when you will run out of whatever you've got on your blending tool. That's fine, because once you run out you can just reload it with another colour. Unless you're using something like black, and then what I find is if you've got black on a page, I usually go in and wash my blending tool. Right, just put a little bit of this on there. And then we'll change this up to be another colour. Right, there you go, so that's one. Diane Reevely doesn't normally use more than 2 stencils on one page, and I think that's a wise move. So right, I'm going to come in with another colour now. So we've done teal. What's this? Peony blush. We've got quite a few pink pages. There's quite a lot of pink in here. Let's not do pink. Let's do yellow, lemon zest. Now this lemon zest mixed with the teal on my blending brush is probably going to turn it yellow, green. That doesn't bother me, it's just another colour. So let's see if I've got anywhere where I didn't put any the first time around. Right, so coming in with cascading cubes. Yep, see, it just turned it lime. As I said, doesn't bother me. I'm going to flip to the last page. Right, this has already got lime on it. Just might do a couple of little spaces of this. Doesn't have to be a lot. Oh, there you go. Let's do pink and lime green. There you go. That's a bit of a shocker, isn't it? If you're going to use the craft paints for this instead of Diane Reevely's, you might need to have a little more waiting time in between working on the pages, purely because the paint is going to be ever so slightly wetter for you. So you need to let it dry a bit. And if you're going to doodle or do drawing on top of these, you need to let them be completely 100% dry. I might do with a bit of green on there before you start doodling, because otherwise your pens will just stop working. They'll work for the time you're using them, but when you go back to using them again, they won't work a second time round. Right, I think we're done with that one. Right, let's come in with some dots, because who doesn't like a dot? Right, I think we're going to add some drama. Let's do some black. Now, I normally reserve black for borders and stuff like that, but I think a little touch of black here and there is not going to be a problem, because black brings all of the colours into the foreground. So, right, now I do know there was one, right, there's 2 on there. There's 2 on there. There's 1 on there. So let's put a little bit of black on here. There's a little bit of a line of it down there. Right. There's only, need someone here. Try to vary where you place your stencil work. I'm terrible. I tend to do the same areas on each piece of art, which is just a habit. It's just, and it's not a great habit. I'm trying to break myself of it. So I always tend to do there, there and there. So you can see I'm trying to vary it ever so slightly. Right, so I think our pages are finished. Now, these, of course, can have black borders put on them, which is what I did on the other ones. I'm wondering whether I want just a touch of black on one of these. I know I did say no, but I think maybe if I just do a little bit at the top, as if it is a border. See what I mean? It'll just frame it out a little bit. And as I've got black on my, there you go, that just gives it some corner pieces. Let's use up the rest of what's on here. Just to give it a bit of a frame. So anyway, this is how I did my painty pages, guys. This is how I did this version of it anyway. Give this a bit of a corner up here. And give that a little bit of an edge down there. So, hopefully that was enjoyable. We now need to work on the next set of designs, which is actually the watercolor ones. So obviously I need to stop because I need to wash this, I need to wipe the stencils down, I need to set up for watercolor next. So for the watercolor techniques, all I did was I have the same spritz bottle of water. I have a container of water here, which I'm just going to take the lid off. I usually keep the lid on it as long as I can because I can be a bit of a klutz. I also have a roll of kitchen towel or kitchen paper, which whatever name you know it by. And I've got a travel pack of watercolors. And to start them off, I'm just going to spritz the whole palette, and that will start activating the paints. I'm not going to have that on screen, I don't think, because I think maybe I can have it on screen. I'm trying to work out where best it is. And I've got a reasonably large brush for this. It could be any brush, doesn't necessarily need to be a watercolor brush. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spritz the pages again. This just helps the fibers relax a little bit so that I'm not fighting with the book closing all of the time. If there's one thing I've learned about one of these books, it's you can't be precious about it. You just basically need to understand it's part of the process for things to get messy, things to leak around. So I'm going to come in, I then take a bit of water on the page and I will pick up a colour and I will smear it around. Again, using what I did before of, I tend to use 3 different areas. I need more water on there for a start. 3 areas, but that's just a guideline. Now, I am by no way a watercolorist. I mean, I'd love to be, but I've never managed to actually manage watercolors. Now, I'm actually going to work on the same page throughout, so I'm going to come in with the next color, which I think, oh, it's quite an emerald green, isn't it? And I'm just going to put it on. As soon as it's on, I can move it with water. Now, I'm keeping my brush wet. I'm trying to be conscious that not too much water goes down the spine. And if it does, I'll come in with some of that kitchen paper and I will pick it up with my kitchen paper and actually just blot it out of the spine for no other reason than it'll just eat into everything else that's down there. I don't want the fibres of the cover getting wet. Right, I think I want to put some yellow in here now, because yellow is part of green, so I'm okay with that. Just need to have something on it. Now, this part of the book can be anything from doodling to sketching to actually, so I'll pull that out the middle there, to actually being something like a reverse colouring book. If you're not familiar with a reverse colouring book is, basically it's a book that you buy that's already got this lot done on it. And it's a bit like cloud watching. You look at the patches and then you go in with a pen and you actually outline sections and make out of the background what you think should be out of the background. Let's come on in a little bit further here. Again, just get something on the page. I know we spritzed it with water, but it will need something else. Let's come in with pink. Oh, it's purple. Okay. Now, you could do a similar technique to this with acrylics if you wished. It doesn't have to be watercolors. The first time I saw this done, it was with watercolors, and I already have watercolors, so I like the effect. Watercolors will dry lighter. So if you're thinking it looks a little intense at some point, give it a few minutes to dry. It's probably not going to stay that intense. Right, what other colour do I want in here? Let's do some orange. I wouldn't normally put orange and this colour together, but as long as they're not mixing too much, I'm likely to save the day. Do you know what I mean? They will blend into each other a little bit, but I'm not hugely upset by that. Right, what other colour do we want in here? Maybe a touch of blue. So as you can see, it's just creating. That's all I'm doing, is I'm just throwing stuff down on a page. So as you can see, where my pages close together, they've given me that ink blot look. That's fine. I will periodically come in and soak up the excess because I'm looking for a nice delicate background without stuff stuck to it. So I don't mind blotting it out occasionally. So let's go to this page now. Feel free to fast forward, guys, at any point with any of the videos I put out. I'm not offended. I wouldn't even know. But you do what you need to see and then hopefully take something from that. Let's put some yellow in here. It's a really nice sunshiny colour. Very orange around. Let's get some orange on the go. Now, I do tend to go back and forth and blot previous pages. So that is part of my process. Just because I'm conscious I don't want things getting way too wet on me. Because then there's the potential that the papers may start falling to pieces or the spine may start to fall apart. But that would happen with anything if you made it far too wet. I think that's okay. Let's go back to our previous page, which is this one. I'm going to come in and give this a bit of a blot. There you go. I like the way it leaves a little bit of texture. Right, let's come back to here. Right, this is the final page of this section, so let's get some colour on here. And I think we might go to greens again. I quite like greens. I'd like greens that have actually made them wet enough to paint with. Now, I don't mind really pale. In fact, really pale can be really lovely because even if you're not using these pages to doodle on or anything, if you're someone who likes to write messages or quotes or stuff, or you like, I know Diane actually saves quotes as she's traveling around, or sayings, or little quirky things that she comes across. You can write them on these pages. You could journal on these pages. I mean, especially the watercolour ones. I'm not 100% certain how the acrylic ones would work with a pen if you weren't using, like a gel pen will work on a acrylic background, because remember when it dries it's almost a plastic. So where did I go to? Right, is that the first one? That was the first one. Right, let's come in here. So for those of you who asked for this video, I can't remember each of them. I know there was Claire, I think there was Adam, oh, I've forgotten, and I don't have, oh, Michelle, I think there was a Michelle. Hopefully this is what you were hoping to see. I mean, I think there are about 6 of you. I will put you in the description box just so you know who you are, so that I just found that this was a better way to answer the question than actually trying to answer it in words, because sometimes the answer is so long, it's just easier to make a video. I'm going to leave that as out. I quite like that. Right, do I have a wet one back here somewhere? Right, again, coming in, I'm just going to blot that. I'm using the same piece of paper to blot every single time. I'm focusing on the spine, purely because I don't want it seeping through to other pages. Oh, that turned out interesting. That wasn't my intent, but that's fine. Now, of course, you can do splashes and splatters on these pages as well. That's another, oh, that's another nice one. Just gives bits of interest. So you can see I'm quite quickly turning pages into backgrounds already. So come into this one next, I think. And each of these different techniques has a different style when it's finished, a different look. And maybe a variety of the 3 in the one book might actually be better than the version I did, which was I tended to put 3 different books. Well, actually I did 4 different books, didn't I? So I think that needs a blue to go with that. That one's probably going to smush nicely. Let's get that. You don't need to do the smushing technique, that just happens to be me working at speed. I just want to make sure that there's nothing seeping under there I don't want. I think this is the last page, to be honest. Now, as you're handling these, you're going to find they feel quite fragile. If you were to tug on the page, they probably would be quite fragile. So what I would recommend is once these are all done, I tend to stand the book on its end, and I will show you that once I've finished all 3. And I usually let it sit overnight because once the fibres dry out, of course, they're all going to go back to normal. So you could be using spray inks as well. That's another one you could use in this book. I haven't used spray inks in here, but you could easily use spray inks. Let's use a bit of that in there. I think a little bit there. So this is very much, I don't care. That's what I'm trying to convince myself of, is I'm doing this, but do I mind? No, I don't mind. Right. So where am I up to? I think I've done all of these. Yeah, these pages will feel really soft. These are already beginning to come back to normal because they're drying out. Got a bit of purple there I don't want to see coming through. But once you've done a section or you've done a book, don't keep turning the pages back and forth. Just let them sit. Right, so we're on to the last one. So I now need to clear the decks again and set up for the next one. In the interim, I'm going to stand this on its edge, separate the pages slightly just to let the air start circulating through. And this is how I would stand it overnight if I was, when I've done all the processes. Right, time for a clean up, time for me to dig out the inks, and then we do the next stage. So for the last set of backgrounds in our little Arty journal, we're going to be using distress oxides or distress inks. Anything that's kind of just water soluble is what I'm grasping for. I happen to have the Ranger ones here because they're the ones I use for this. I don't have a huge selection and I will name them as I pull them in. This next section is going to get wet and it's going to get a bit messy. If you feel, oh, my pages feel a bit soft to be doing this, you can always hit them with a hairdryer. Okay, just don't think you have to keep going. I mean, I could have done the first section and let it dry. I could have done every other page of this and let it dry and then moved on. But just because we're trying to do what we're doing, I'm trying to work through all of this. Right, so I'm going to come in. I've got shabby shutters first of all. Just the colours I'm choosing. I'm putting it on my mat here. I could be putting this onto a glass mat. I could put this onto any wipeable, cleanable surface, to be honest with you. I'm going to spray a bit of water and I'm literally going to come in and pick up colour. And I'm just going to turn to another section and keep on picking up colour. I don't always need to spray the pages. I usually only do that if I'm coming in and picking up a new colour. Like I can spritz that now. Let's go in with iced spruce, which is another colour I quite like. I don't have a huge amount of these inks, but I do have enough to make it interesting, should we say. I tend to pick up my favourite colours and stick with them. I think Tim launches a new colour each month. My budget is not going to run to buying new inks from Tim Holtz every single month. So, and I don't need that. I don't need them every single month either. So just coming back and forth. Now, if you wanted, you could easily use some of this ink and add it to your watercolour pages if you wanted to add anything to those. Now, I've gone through this a couple of times, so I'm just going to make sure things aren't getting too wet on me, because, as I said, this is a very wet technique, and I don't want it going down. There's a hair there. Whose hair is that? I don't have hair. I think he might. Maybe it's the dog. Wouldn't be surprised. I think he was in here the other day. Right. So let's liven this up a bit now with maybe a bit of spiced marmalade. Am I in shot? I am in shot. Oh, I spritz the paper first. Weird. I don't normally do that. I mean, spritz the mat first. Right, let's pick up some of this. This is a fun technique because you never know what you're going to get. I like this technique a lot. It appeals to my mucky childhood nature. So, and again, you don't need to cover all the surfaces. You could end up leaving white spaces, because white spaces are opportunities to do different things within. Let's see, I've got another bit. I'm losing track which is brushing and which is not. I think that's ink. Right, now, you can use minis. I mean, I've got this little Festive Berries mini. I think this came as I was at a retreat somewhere, and I think this was part of the goodie bag. So, ooh, that's a bit murdery, isn't it? Let's come into the back of there and add some of that onto there. I quite like the drama of that though, so we might be doing that colour again. So it's just about having fun, guys. It's just about having fun. If you end up and you've chosen the wrong paper to do this with, and things fall out of your album or the pages come unstuck, that's fine. Just either stick the pages to another page, or just treat them as an individual thing to work on. It doesn't always have to be in a book. Mine is going into a book purely because I'm travelling, and I want to put it in my Midori cover so that I've got something with me while I'm at the airport or I'm on the go. Okay, right, where are we up to? I think we need to add some. Have I got purple on any of these pages? No, let's put some purple out. Right, Villainous Potion. I think this was the last one I bought. That'll show you how long ago I bought Tim Holtz inks. I do love his products, but there's just too many of them for me. Besides trying to keep up with the techniques, it's about keeping up with using them and the value for using them. Like, just because something is out there doesn't mean I want to own it, because if it's just going to sit on my shelf and I don't use it, then to me that's a complete waste of effort. I'm not doing the back one again, am I? So I think I just know that needs a bit of a blot. Let's get a bit of clean kitchen towel. If that is one thing I am conscious of when doing this, I'm trying to make sure that the pages don't stay soaked too long. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's leaving them while you work on another page, and then there's leaving them for half an hour, and they end up so wet that they tear. And I think that would happen with any art journal. All right, this one appeals to me down there. This can go on to the purple because purple and yellow are complementaries. Let's flip to the back. There's already yellow there. That's already nice. That could do with a bit of life. Let's put some yellow on there. So I think this is pretty much going to be the last colour I do, unless I see anything that I'm blaringly obvious about, or I need to change that, or I need to give it more. Like, that's cute. As I said, not everything needs to be a full page. So let's have a quick look at the inky pages to see where we're at. Right, that needs a bit of a blot. Inks will fade when they dry. So even though they look really vibrant, just know that they are likely to dry paler. And what I'll do is I will do the final flip through of this once it's dry, purely so you can actually see how each of the pages has turned out. So what I'll probably do is I will probably turn the video camera off and hit this entire book with a hairdryer. Right, okay, so we're at that stage where I'm going to stop now. I'm going to hairdry this and then we'll flip through the whole thing so you can actually see what they look like when they're fully dried. So here you go, guys. I've used a hairdryer to dry this. It's 99% dry. As I said, I would naturally leave this standing on its end overnight just to fully dry out. But a couple of things will make one of these. First of all, I've done this end to end within about an hour and a half in a video. I wouldn't recommend doing that as a one-off process. Like, I would probably make the cover, let it dry overnight. I would probably, with the dye and Reevely paints, it's okay to do all of the pages because it dries so much. The watercolour pages, I'd probably do every other one. And then the next day when they're dry, come back and do the ones in between. And even the same process for the inky ones, because there's always a danger that the water is going, or the ink is going to gather in the spine, and it could end up ripping your pages. So just be aware of that. Now, I know I'm going to get a question in the comments going, Ceri, why can't you do your pages before you sew them in? You can. But if you do that, you'll have individual pages, you won't have double spreads, which is equally as easy. So if you wanted to make all your pages front and backs before you sewed them in, by all means do that. You'll end up mixing all the techniques together as well. You'll have just that to work on instead of a double spread. Let them fully dry and then sew them in, and then you'll get near the same result. But that's how I make one of those, guys. So hopefully you like that. Just to let you know, by the way, these are not my original ideas. A Midori or a traveller's notebook has been around for a very, very long time. This technique is very much dye and Reevely inspired. She does this a lot with paints and she does it with inks. This watercolour technique, I can't remember where I first saw it, but I've done it for a very long time. It's just literally creating a background. This smooshing technique, I've seen Tim Holtz do it. I think I was first introduced by, I think it was Shanuki Art I first saw this done. And then I saw Tim Holtz do it, which I'm sure is what inspired Shanuki anyway. So I will put any links I think are relevant into the description below. Hopefully that answered the subscribers' comments. This has given you everything I can think that you need to know now. We've worked our way through this entire travel Arty journal of mine, doing all the different elements from the cover to the individual bits to the techniques. So I'm absolutely certain this is going to be the close of this, because I can't think of anything else you're going to ask me, but please, if there is, just ask me in the comments. Okay, so putting that to one side, I'm Ceri the Crafter. That's Ceri the Crafter. Until next time, bye-bye now.